Hello and welcome to the first of our 3 specials on the responsible use of artificial intelligence in the military domain. We are coming to you from the Royal Netherlands Army Base. We are here to build up to the REAIM Summit, which will be taking place at The Hague on the 15th and the 16th of February 2023. It is being hosted by the Netherlands government and also their partners in the Republic of Korea. So what is the purpose of these 3 specials? We want to understand what artificial intelligence is and how it is being applied and deployed in the military domain. But not only that, to understand the risks, the challenges and the concerns, particularly from civil society partners. They will be raising some of their concerns and the challenges in the conversations that we will be having. I'm delighted to be joined later on by Professor Lonneke Peperkamp, who is a professor of military ethics and leadership at the Netherlands Defence Academy, and she will be sharing some insights. I'm particularly looking forward to her comments around international frameworks and normative standards. We know that all of war happens within some sort of legal and moral framework, but when it comes to artificial intelligence in particular in the military domain, what are some of those agreements? We'll find out more. So before we start our conversation with Professor Lonneke, we went out into the streets to test some views and opinions on the responsible use of artificial intelligence in the military domain. Take a listen.
What do you think AI is and does?
It's artificial intelligence, but as a philosopher, I would not say it's intelligence.
Something to do with machines and intelligence.
Artificial intelligence, mostly algorithms.
Certain robots can do certain operations instead of the human being.
Artificial intelligence would be having a robot, a vacuum cleaner.
Generally, I would just say computing, things made by computers.
I mean, it's crazy how much is being implemented. Pretty much more than most people realize, I think. More than I realize, probably.
It's everywhere. If you search Google, it uses artificial intelligence and it keeps improving its performance. It's in your pocket, it's on your phone, and it's also used in industry, for example, in retail, in order picking and sorting products together with robot hands.
AI is about making machines intelligent. Historically, it is machines whose actions can be expected to achieve their objectives. We're increasingly changing that to machines whose actions can be expected to achieve our objectives.
One day the AIs are going to look back on us the same way we look at fossils.
There's a lot of hype that comes with both robotics and AI. It's lots of fun to work in the domain, but it's not nearly where the movies portray it. So, people are a little disappointed. Why is that robot slow, or how come that AI is not so good? It takes a little bit of getting used to that, but it's still amazing technology. It's lots of fun to work with.
I am worried because if it's too much of it, then there might be unemployment for a lot of people, because machines will be doing the work instead of the people.
For me, it's not that scary. I mean, I kind of grew up in social media and all of that kind of stuff.
I'm very worried about killer robots. Just generally, like the whole drone industry.
Things like deepfakes scare me a lot.
I would say human extinction.
So the risks that are happening right now are AI systems that perform in unintended ways, partly because of careless design. So for example, you can train machine learning systems to filter resumes, and they will often filter out the resumes of women for a tech job, for example. We're also seeing risks from social media algorithms, the recommender systems that fill your news feed or your YouTube video sequence, that are learning how to manipulate people over time to change people into more predictable consumers of whatever material they can supply. In the longer term, we're most concerned about the risk of losing control, that will build AI systems that are pursuing incorrectly specified objectives that then prevent us from interfering with that pursuit, so we end up losing control to the machines.
The biggest risk is that we stop to be able to bear responsibility because you are using instruments and tools that we don't understand. And if people ask us, what have you done? That we cannot answer that question satisfactorily.
We need to put the brakes on a little bit. Slow down and like talk about it and think about, have these discussions, what might happen.
Many people are moving the potential date for general purpose intelligence closer to the present than they were before, and I think some people are even talking about the next 5 years.
We're not going to have sentient AI. This is part of the hype, right? And so that'll probably disappoint some people. I'm sure there'll be some people that disagree with me on that one. So far, history is on my side, and no, these are just machines at the end of the day. They're programmed by people, for people.
So the holy grail is explainable AI. So how can we human beings understand what is happening inside? How can we bear responsibility for the outcomes, while at the same time using those powerful machines?
So much to unpack from that video, but I think the theme has been articulated by two of our interlocutors. One of them said, slow down and talk about it. And another says, how can we bear responsibility? And that is the tone of our conversation with you, Professor Lonneke Peperkamp. Thank you very much for joining us, by the way. Military ethics, that whole concept of there being ethics and normative standards that govern the military, something that is thought of as aggressive. How do you explain that?
Well, it might seem that the laws are silent during war, but actually they are not. So international law applies to armed conflict, and it's aimed at preventing excesses and to make warfare as humane as possible. So those rules are aimed at protection of civilians and preventing unnecessary suffering. And moral just war theory justifies these rules, and it grounds those rules into moral principles. So, of course, we see that things can go horribly wrong in war, which is why it's so important to uphold and reaffirm these international agreements. These are vitally important in the world today. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then also now what we see with those technological developments that change the face of war, they can bring great advantages. They can make military systems more accurate, faster. They can limit human error, but they also come with certain risks, which is why we need clear rules without hindering the valuable technological development.
Mm-hmm. We'll talk a little bit more about those international frameworks, but we saw in the video that artificial intelligence applications are already in use in the civil sector and in the military sector. And as you say, artificial intelligence has already started to significantly impact warfare. Can you just talk to us about some of the developments in the military domain, some of the case studies that we can relate to?
There are a lot of AI applications in the military domain. So it's used, for example, to enhance cybersecurity. It's used in transport and logistics, for combat training, to support healthcare, and also, of course, to analyze data. And of course, when people think about AI in the military domain, you also think about the integration of AI into weapon systems.
Mm-hmm. So I felt like I was in good company there as I was listening to some of the speakers, because in my mind, you have artificial intelligence. Does that mean we're going to have these robots? We're going to have these bots just taking over our lives? Or are we watching too much television? Is there such a scenario? Is it likely of the machines making decisions for us and starting wars that we can't control?
I don't think that the image of killer robots taking over is realistic, but it's an image that is out there, and it's an image that is terrifying, understandably. And there are definitely concerns when it comes to AI and weapon systems, but I think it shouldn't prevent us from having a nuanced debate. There are definitely concerns, but also benefits, and there are no black and white answers there.
And I'm glad you mentioned things like healthcare, helping us make decisions better and faster and protecting citizens. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment, but we are already hearing that artificial intelligence is already applied in the military and the civil domain. Let's get into a couple of those artificial intelligence applications. How can AI support military decision-making? And are there risks involved? Well, to test this hypothesis, we went to Research Center TNO, who does some important work in this field. Take a listen.
We developed this prototype in order to help the commander, which is in the field, in determining a good course of action. We analyze satellite images and other data sources to create a 3D terrain of the mission area for the use of the commander. There are several characteristics that are very different between the civil domain and the military domain when it comes to AI. In the civil domain, you often have a lot of data and you have a controlled environment. While in the military domain, there often is no data and you're in an open environment. The enemy is not providing you with any data, and anything can happen in the real world that you didn't expect. That's also why we have to do these feasibility studies in order to experience in what conditions AI can work and in what conditions AI cannot work yet. We use this 3D mission area for various military simulations. These prototypes have as goal to support the commander in time-critical situations. So the enemy is approaching, you have to decide now what the best plan is. What currently is happening, you rely on your experience, on your training and on your intuition. Such a prototype, it helps you in thinking of other options that you did not think of, or it confirms that the plan that you thought of yourself is indeed a good plan. The great promise of AI is it will solve everything. That's absolutely not true. You have to work hard to define your problem space, develop your training data. The AI is not an entity that can decide on itself what to do. You have to manually configure what it does. The human aspect is very important in the military domain. You want to make sure that decisions are not being made autonomously by future AI systems, but you want a human either in the loop or on the loop, so that there's always a control mechanism to reject any wrong decisions that the AI can make. There's always a risk that the user of such an AI system will start to blindly trust the AI system. We recognize this risk, so we also design the system in a way that we make sure that the commander is not too dependent on this future system.
Professor Lonneke, your reaction to what we've just watched?
Yeah, this is of course a great example of how AI can be used in the military domain as decision support, so to provide an additional source of information and to place the commander in a better position to take its decision. And also what you see, the research at TNO is exactly what needs to be done. So the feasibility studies to test, under which conditions AI can help us and also what the limitations are.
So the decision making, is it still the commander who's in charge? Is AI coming in here as a second opinion, or can the decision making be reversed actually?
Well, you see also in the video that there is a risk of bias, both in the civil and in the military domain, so that the system performs in unintended ways, for example, disadvantages certain groups of people. And also, of course, there's always a margin of error. So to prevent unwanted bias and to prevent errors, human control is very important. And when you change the role of the human from in the loop, so taking the decision, what you see here, to on the loop, so the human having supervision over this process, then you can increase the risk of bias and errors occurring. So it might make it harder to exercise effective human control. And that is because a lack of understanding could be a problem, that we don't understand those systems completely anymore. So it turns into a black box. And therefore, it's important to focus on explainable AI, but also the risk of automation bias, so that people tend to overtrust the system. So therefore, we need to focus on making people not too dependent on AI, but also to develop tools that can enhance that critical supervision.
It sounds as if the awareness of what could possibly go wrong, the biases that you so articulate, is the first step. And speaking of human control, this is one of the main focus of civil society organization PACS. They're speaking quite strongly on this. Let's hear what they have to say.
We as civil society all over the world think that we need to draw a line. Like what kind of human control, meaningful human control, do we want to keep in warfare? And what kind of control do we want to have within the use of autonomous weapon systems? So it's not that we are against AI or against robotics or against autonomy, but we are worried that in the end we end up with weapon systems making decisions over life and death. So it's the critical functions within a weapon system to select and attack targets. And on those critical functions, the selection and attacking of targets, meaningful human control should be retained. And that's our worry.
Professor Lonneke, are these fears justified?
Well, I understand those worries because the risks that we just talked about, you don't want a system to perform in unintended ways. That is especially problematic, of course, when it comes to life and death decisions. So PAX is especially worried about fully autonomous weapon systems. We don't see them yet. They are not used right now, but we do see drones, for example, weapon systems with a high degree of autonomy. But the weapon systems that can select and attack targets without human intervention are not used at this time.
Mm-hmm. But still, the most significant dangers when it comes to that level of autonomy, what is the most significant danger, would you say?
Well, the biggest risk, of course, is that these systems would not be able to comply with international law and ethical standards, so that it would lead, for example, to indiscriminate or disproportionate violence. And also that it's a problem that if something goes wrong, that no one might be held accountable, or that it's difficult, at least, to establish accountability. And on the other hand, states have a responsibility to protect their own populations. And we see all sorts of new threats, hypersonic missiles, cyber attacks, for which human decision time is just not fast enough.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's find out a little bit more about those international agreements. I mean, you touched on it when we started, and this is just to contain states, to prevent disaster, to prevent excesses. And we've seen that in the international space where frameworks are negotiated, consensus is reached, and the main focus, we hope, as citizens of the world, is that our safety is at the central part. So getting international agreements and frameworks to actually work when it comes to how artificial intelligence in the military is applied, it is deployed. The international community has created some frameworks. They are still a work in progress. Let's hear a little bit more about that.
One of the first initiatives to control weapons and weapon technology was that in 1899 there was a ban on the so-called dum-dum bullet. It's a bullet that expands on impact, creating terrible wounds on the victim. So you could say for moral reasons that the dum-dum bullet was banned, and most countries signed that treaty.
Over the years, more treaties have been enacted in order to regulate the use, development and possession of various types of weapon systems, like the Geneva Protocol, which bans the use of chemical and biological weapons, or the Outer Space Treaty, which bans the storage of weapons of mass destruction in space.
Usually it's a group of countries that come together and say, okay, this is a weapon we simply do not want, or a weapon there we really have to make sure that we have good agreements. If you take, for example, nuclear weapons, the great powers, it was during the Cold War, so particularly the United States and the Soviet Union said, okay, we have those stockpiles, but we also have to control them. And they got much support from other countries saying it's basically so important to come to good agreements, otherwise it will completely go out of hand.
The atomic bomb is too dangerous to be loose in a lawless world.
This agreement led to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to prevent nuclear proliferation, promote nuclear disarmament, and promote peaceful uses of nuclear energy.
I must say that the Treaty on Artificial Intelligence covers new ground. What makes it difficult is that I think here technology that can be put to peaceful and civilian use and to military use are very much intertwined. You also see that, of course, with nuclear energy. You can also use nuclear energy for peaceful means. To make it a good treaty, you shouldn't have too many barriers that impede, let's say, useful or peaceful applications of the technology. And I think that also applies to artificial intelligence.
Right. Professor Lonneke, so where are we now? Are we on the eve of such a milestone international framework and agreement?
Well, you see that this is a long and quite complicated process. There have been talks within a group of governmental experts on the topic of autonomous weapon systems within the UN Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons. And those talks have been going on for about 8 or 9 years, and that has been really helpful to clarify issues, to come to some sort of agreement. They have established guiding principles, but nonetheless it's very important to keep building that normative framework and to determine what we mean by responsible use of AI in the military domain.
And I'm sure these are some of the themes that will be articulated at the REAIM Summit. Would you say that the REAIM Summit is important in that regard?
Yeah, it's very important, this summit, because it brings together different types of experts with different backgrounds. So from governments, from armed forces, from academic institutions, but also private actors. And you see also in the video that that is very important because the civil and the military domain in the context of AI and technology is very much intertwined. So it's important to bring those actors together and to build knowledge and to set the international agenda and to work further towards building this normative framework that we need.
So somebody who started watching us at the beginning and was quite anxious about artificial intelligence and how it is changing our world, it sounds as if, yes, there are some risks, there are some challenges, but the conversations are ongoing and there is a desired outcome. In your mind, in conclusion, what is the desired outcome of the REAIM Summit?
I think it's good to be modest, but that it would be wonderful if we can flesh out some very important concepts like meaningful human control, effective interaction between human and machine, and to establish the challenges, so to explore the challenges, but also to explore the benefits that AI applications have in the military domain.
Thank you so very much. And that is our aim with our 3 specials as we build up to the REAIM Summit, to delve deeper into what is really a fascinating topic. Very little is known, but work is ongoing and it has an impact on us as citizens. What do we need to know about the responsible use of artificial intelligence in the military domain? Are there some laws, some normative frameworks that will ensure that states don't act in a way that is destructive, but rather act in a way that protect citizens all over? And can we have a different way of making decisions in the military domain? What is true and what is known is that technology is a reality that we can't go backwards. It can improve our lives, it can create some much needed innovation, but we need to be mindful of the challenges. And our 3 specials on the responsible use of artificial intelligence in the military domain are aimed at exactly that. Now remember, we are building up to our gathering at The Hague in February 15th and 16th. This is a summit that will bring together, as we heard from Professor Lonneke, policymakers, government, civil society, the private sector as well. It is being hosted by the government of the Netherlands together with their partner, the Republic of Korea. You can register for the REAIM Summit. Thank you so much for watching and stay with us on this journey as we delve deeper into artificial intelligence in the military domain.